What's up, guys? Welcome back to FishOfHex. This is Travis here. Appreciate you stopping in. In today's video, I'm going to show you the food that I make here in the fish room. Now, this stuff sustains the entire fish room, including the 300, the 30-gallon, the frac system, as well as the 6 quarantine tanks, and I really love this stuff. Not only does it take care of the fish, but it also takes care of the coral at the same time. Now, in this video, I'm going to show you how I make this food, how I get it ready to be fed. You guys will see how I feed the tanks, and I'll show you how I manipulate the flow with the Apex, the Jabo pumps, and the return pump / feed modes. And I'm going to show you guys how I manipulate the system in order to not only take care of the fish, but to also feed the coral at the same time. So let's go and get into it. So basically what I do is I take a bunch of food that I usually feed my fish separately and combine it together, making a nice paste, which I'll refreeze and then be able to break it off and feed the fish, basically giving them everything at one time. Now, some of the ingredients here are bloodworms, shrimp, scallops, octopus, nori, PE calanus, krill, fish eggs, mysis shrimp, sponge, and mussels. Now, I like to have all this stuff together because it is just a ton of different foods. It's a good variety. It's good for their diet, and my fish are very fat and very healthy, and it definitely promotes eating, especially in the quarantine tanks. I'll go ahead and put a piece of this food in within 24 hours of adding a fish to quarantine, and I'll come back in a couple hours. It's completely gone. So they're definitely eating and I'm more successful with my quarantine with this type of food. So let's go ahead and break down how I get this ready for the blender. So you guys can see I'm actually putting the bloodworms, the mysis shrimp, and I'm going to put the krill in this water with my net. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to thaw out these 3 ingredients because the water that comes with them, that they're packaged in, is usually very dirty and it's just full of unnecessary nutrients. And what I'm going to do is just simply thaw it out real quick, strain it with the net, and then put it in the blender. You don't have to do that, but this food is so nutrient dense, and it will destroy your tank if you feed too much of it because there are so many nutrients in it that you just don't want that excess stuff with the water and that came with the packaging. And that's pretty much the whole reason behind it. So I'm going to thaw this stuff out and then we'll start blending. So the first thing I like to do is go ahead and lay everything out on the cutting board. Now you guys can see here that I have my nori. It's approximately 7 sheets of it, and really the reason behind it is not only to have it in the diet for the tanks, but to also allow the food to kind of float for a longer period of time. And you guys will see that in the video that it actually stays at the surface for a while until the fish of course grab it and drag it down and shred it to pieces. But other than that, I like to go ahead and take all this food out of the packaging, and if you guys have ever used this type of packaging before, you know that it has the aluminum on the back. Now it just makes sure that you take everything out and then double check the food that there isn't any pieces of aluminum in there, because the last thing you want to do is add that stuff to your tank. Alright, so we're just about to start blending, but first let's go ahead and check out our krill, mysis shrimp, and bloodworms. And as you guys can see, the water is pretty nasty, and that is the exact reason why I do want that stuff in my tank. It's pretty nasty. It's definitely full of a ton of excess nutrients that, again, will just cause issues with your tank if you start feeding in excess. And yeah, so basically I'm just going to kind of give it a little squeeze, drain out as much of the water as I can, and then get it over to the blender. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and make this food now. Basically, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to go ahead and take all of the ingredients, put them together in a blender. And if you guys notice, I have some water there in the back. Now, that is RODI water from my storage bin. And we're going to go ahead and use it if the food doesn't want to spin that well in a blender. Now, this is a cheap blender, so I don't expect it to go powerhousing on it. If you have more of an expensive one, you probably won't have to use as much water as I did. But other than that, I'm simply going to put everything together and blend it up to a kind of like a sludge type of consistency. Alright, now that we have all the frozen food mixed up, we're going to go ahead and add the rest of the nori, finish incorporating it into this mixture, and then get over to packaging. Now, when it comes to packaging this food, I like to use Ziploc baggies. I like to basically fold over the end there so I don't get it in the zip lining, but just filling up the bags about 1/3 of the way with this paste, and then flattening them out, getting as much of the air out of the bag as I can. And what this does is it allows the bag to freeze in a basically a flat brick form. If you bought any kind of LRS types of food, they are in that brick form. And basically all you have to do is go in and actually break off a piece of the food and feed it to the fish. No thawing or anything necessary for that. And with multiple systems and multiple fish and all that kind of stuff, it's really easy to do it this way. Now, if I wanted to feed mysis, krill, and those bloodworms separately, I'd of course have to thaw them out first, drain them, and then put them in the tank. With this method here, I just break off a piece of food, put it in the tank, and we're good to go. Alright, so once our bags are filled up and flattened, we're going to go ahead and put them in the freezer for about 24 hours before our first feeding. Now, you definitely want to feed this stuff while it's frozen. You don't want to put it in there thawed because it will just kind of disintegrate into the tank, being useless for the fish. But if you put it in frozen, it allows the fish to pick at it before it does dissolve, allowing them to eat the food. So we're going to go ahead and move over to the 300 gallon. Now, I did already feed them about 6 hours ago, but I doubt they're going to turn down more food. And before we get into that, let's go to move over to the Apex. I'll show you guys my feed modes and what I have turning on, turning off, and and we'll talk about how I manipulate the flow of the tank while we're watching the fish eat. So let's go and do that. All right, so we're here in the Apex. As you guys can see, we have the 300-gallon, the frag tank, and the 30-gallon tank. What we're going to do is focus on the 300-gallon for this video. And basically, when I hit my feed mode A button, either in here or on the display screen, what it's going to do is it's actually going to turn off the return pump, the Nile skimmer, and all 4 of the WP60 power heads in the tank. Now, basically what I use this for is to turn down all the flow. I don't want this food being mixed around by the power heads and going down the drain into the filter socks, causing the filter socks to clog up sooner, and basically taking food away for the fish. So that is the whole point behind taking and turning on the feed mode button. So basically what happens is after the feed mode button has been clicked, it's going to basically turn off in 5 minutes. Now you can go ahead and set this time to whatever works for you, but for me, I like to just go ahead and do it for 5 minutes. And after that 5 minutes, the power heads will be the first piece of equipment to kick back on. Now what this does is takes all the food that is kind of floating around in the water column and it spreads it around the tank, and it basically makes contact with the coral. And at this point, it basically you'll see that my LPS coral blow up. They look very happy. Their tentacles are all out, and they're basically eating during this period of time that the power heads are just kind of running and mixing all the food around in the tank. Now that's going to happen for about 5 minutes, and at that point the main return pump will kick back on. When that return pump kicks back on, of course, it's going to run stuff all the way through the sump, through the filter socks, and then continue to run the system as normal. Now, the key behind all this is I want to just kind of keep the nutrients in the tank as long as I can. And if you guys have seen my previous video, I talked about how powerful this Nile skimmer is. And what I like to do is just go ahead and have the skimmer kick on 30 minutes after that feed button, just giving the tank plenty of time to absorb as much of the nutrients as they can from the food. And then, of course, once the skimmer kicks back in, it just pulls out all the excess that wasn't used up, and that's about it. It just kind of repeats that process every single day. And as you guys can see, the fish are very happy. They're scarfing the food down, and it basically only takes a matter of a couple minutes before everything is gone. And I just really like this process. I've done this on the 125 and it was very successful. And I just like to continue things that have been working well for me for years over to new builds. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about this food, let me know. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.